Today's agenda includes, we're going to talk about computer vision. I'm talking about classification, object detection, visual search, facial recognition, and model training. And we're also going to have a demonstration led by Tony. And just a little bit of background on Clarifai before we get started. Clarifai is the leading independent provider of artificial intelligence for unstructured image and video data. We offer an end-to-end computer vision and natural language processing platform that covers the entire AI lifecycle, from data labeling and training all the way through model development and deployment. Clarifai continues to grow with over 90 employees at our headquarters in New York City, our offices in San Francisco, Washington, D.C., and Tallinn, Estonia. And so with that, let's begin today's talk. To begin with, what are we talking about? What is computer vision? So computers work with image files and video files, so visual data. And when we talk about computer vision, we're really talking about a computer's ability to work with and understand visual data. Computers can learn the visual features of images and videos, and then use these learnings to identify and classify objects and scenes. To break this down just a little bit, what do we mean by features? So computer vision existed before the machine learning revolution, and there are some machine learning computer vision algorithms that have been around for a very long time. And one of the earlier algorithms is demonstrated here and kind of gives an example of what we mean by a feature. So you can see when you look at the human face in most lighting conditions, the nose is going to be more lit up, brighter than the cheeks. And so algorithms were developed, sort of handcrafted by developers to identify when there was a spot that was bright in the middle and dark on both sides. Additionally, eyes tend to cast a shadow and cheeks tend to reflect light. So there was another difference found between the darkness of the line of the eyes and the cheeks. And so people were able to, with their imagination and through observation, find visual features that computers could recognize. So you could feed an image into your system and you could identify these places where there were distinct differences in color intensity or in brightness and darkness. Now with machine learning, this ability to identify features has been superpowered and taken to the next level. And that's the type of computer vision that we're going to be talking about today, where we can identify much finer grained features and we can use our machine learning algorithms to identify these patterns automatically. So we don't have to come up with them in our imaginations. We just feed the system data. So what do we get out of this? Well, first of all, we can classify objects in our visual data. We can say, what is this thing? Computers can be trained to associate real-world objects and scenes with concepts. And by concepts, some people refer to this as metadata, or another way to say it is they're just words, right? So this is a picture of a purse, and then the computer can learn to associate the image of a purse with the word purse or handbag. But how does the computer, an interesting question becomes as you start to dig into these things, is how does the computer actually decide when something is a handbag or a purse? How does it differentiate between sort of finer points of visual observation? Well, this boils down to the predictions that your model is going to be able to make and the thresholds that you will set up on this model. So now I'm using the word model. So what we are talking about here is this ability for machine learning algorithm to study a data set and construct a model of that data set that is a simplified representation of the images and the objects in these images. And these models we will be able to then guess on new data and offer predictions. Predictions are normalized on a scale from 0 to 1, and a prediction with a high level of confidence would be a 1 or a 0.99, and low would be 0. And depending on the performance of your model, you're going to set up thresholds that will decide when or when not you are not going to accept an image as actually being a handbag. Object detection takes this process a step further. In the real world, objects, you're usually not just going to see one object at a time, and you'll see several objects on the scene. Object detection helps you find where an object is before passing it to your classifier to identify what the object is. And so there are special processes that will locate the objects in a scene, and multiple detections are possible in one scene with multiple different kinds of objects. And I would just comment that there is another layer of complexity that we won't really get into today when you start identifying objects in video, because what videos really are a series of still images. And while it's obvious to us when a picture of a refrigerator in one image is the same in the next frame of video, but it's not a trivial thing for a computer to identify that. And at any rate, we do offer tracking models as well that can help you track and maintain the identity of an object across frames of video. Another thing we're going to want to talk about today is visual search. So this ability to identify features ends up being very helpful when we just want to compare the visual similarity of objects. And there's loads of practical applications of visual search, one of which is that you can just insert an image, use an actual image as an input in a search field, as opposed to typing the word blue chair. You can have the actual image. And the actual image of the blue chair that you have in mind has lots more information, lots more descriptive information about what you're after, so that you can then search a database for visually similar images and come up with something that's much closer to your original idea than you might ever be able to describe with search terms in a search field like a traditional search engine would use. Finally, facial recognition is an important part of how these technologies are used. And facial recognition tends to be a combination of the different techniques that we've already talked about, where we're using detection, classification, and visual search, plus a little special sauce tends to be used for facial recognition, where we can identify the landmarks in a face, and make algorithms even more efficient, even better at discerning the fine details between people, so that you can build technologies to verify your identity just with an image of your face. Additionally, the systems can be trained to recognize people by name. But you can just search visually, like in this example on the right-hand side. Inserted a picture of myself, and you can see that is matched on the top row a bunch of other pictures of me. And but it is also on later rows offered other predictions, other matches that are less likely to be me, but that are still sort of maybe people that look like me. And so thresholding is essential in face technologies as well. And for example, you might set a threshold to only accept the top row of results as a match in this sort of a case. And now with that, I'm excited to turn the floor over to Tony. Actually, sorry, I did want to just talk a little bit about model training before I did that, which is something that Tony will be showing you. So we're not in the point in artificial intelligence where we're doing anything like general reasoning, right? So we're only ever able to model a specific data set and make predictions based on a specific model's understanding of the world. So any actual practical application of machine learning, you're going to be working with your labeled data in combination with an algorithm, which is there to study your labeled data and find these patterns, find these features, and then match that up with the processing power that is needed. These are very computationally intensive processes. And from that, you're going to be able to generate this model that then can, you'll be able to feed unseen data, feed new data samples to, and can make predictions on these things. Clarifai offers a lot of helpful transfer learning models. So this is where you're going to be able to quickly prototype your ideas or quickly build solutions based on model embeddings. And you can think of these model embeddings as really large, well-crafted models built on really well-curated data sets where sort of the top layer has been shaved off. So for example, we might have had a data set that learned everything about handbags and the features of handbags, and we shaved off the particular types of handbags that model was trained on, but we kept the features. And then you can add your own concepts, your own words, and connect those features to the specific concepts and words that you want to learn about. This technique is extremely useful because of how fast it is and how accurate. It's astoundingly accurate with very little training data. So transfer learning, huge advantages because you're going to be able to use much less labeled data, much less processing power, which means a more responsive prediction and less training time. And with that, I'll hand the floor over to Tony for the demonstration.
So today I'm going to take you through a few different steps today. I'm going to focus very highly over, how to get signed up for an account, because these are these are models that you can start building today. So I'm going to kind of walk through real quick how that works. I'm going to then focus most of my time on how to actually create some models. And so today we're going to walk through basically doing a workshop around how to create some classification models, how to utilize some of our out-of-the-box detection models, and then how to create custom facial recognition. We'll walk through all of that, and then finally we'll finish up by being able to look at some code and say, how do we call this via the API, so you can start integrating this into your applications and start to take advantage of the Clarifai platform today. So with that in mind, the quick thing that I'd like to show you here is just this nice button that's on our clarifai.com site. This allows you to sign up for your account. You can sign up for an account at any time, and what that's going to then take you to immediately is a page that looks a bit like this. This is the Clarifai portal. This is where we really start to see the rubber meet the road when it comes to creating creating applications that we can go and start utilizing within our companies. So when we start to see this, the first thing that we have to do is we can go through and hit this button to create an application. The first application that we're going to create today is going to be a custom classifier. This classifier is going to allow us to understand or create a model that can understand a series of lungs that actually have COVID diagnosed, a previous diagnosis of COVID. So this is fairly, something that I don't have any domain knowledge of how the lungs work or anything like that. I couldn't tell you by looking at a picture, but machine learning and through what Jeff was talking about, being able to identify those particular features that are characteristic of lungs that have had COVID in the past, that's there. And so allowing us to take advantage of the imagery and the labeled imagery in particular, to be able to say, okay, we're going to create a model that can start classifying lungs, pictures of lungs, x-rays of lungs into these two separate categories is very easy to do on Clarifai's platform. And we can do that in about 5 minutes. So let's go ahead and get started. I define an app ID. This app ID is going to be my API endpoint that I can call for when I want to go and start utilizing this. Say if I wanted to build an application that I wanted to put on the Google Play Store, on the Apple Store. So all I have to do is put in my application ID. Okay, I can go and put in a easily understood display name. So if I decide to share this with my coworkers and they can start taking advantage of this, this is where I can put that display name. I can then select my base workflow. So the base workflows that we have here are going to be all of the things that are available out of the box. So you can see we've got things like travel model, we've got things like the food model, apparel model, moderation. All of these kind of allow us to get a jump start because these are also pre-trained embeddings models that we can take advantage of if we're wanting to train a model for a particular vertical sector that we wanted to focus on. I'm going to go ahead and select create here. Now this is going to create the little silo here that I've got for my data. Now the next thing that I can do is I select the data mode here. Data mode screen takes me to the ability to look at my specific data sets that I have available. And now I've got two separate data sets. One is for the training data for COVID, and one is for testing data. And so typically I will have reserved some data for actually going back and testing out my model after I've gone through and trained. So I'm not reusing data that I've trained on for testing. So the first step is I'm going to import my data for all of the lungs that have been diagnosed with COVID. Let me go ahead and hit OK here. And I'm going to go ahead and let that data upload and process. And so I've got about 20 pictures. They've all uploaded to the Clarifai portal, and they've been processed. Now, this is all available via the API as well. So I can create a Python script that can do the same thing through web services as what you're seeing here. But this is just a good way to visualize it so I can share on our webinar here. I'm going to go ahead and select my data set. I can go ahead and I'm going to create a concept for these. This is going to be COVID lungs, not lunch. We go ahead and hit add. All right. I'm going to label the selection as COVID lungs. Go ahead and hit label. Now my data has been labeled. The next step will be to go ahead and create I'm going to go ahead and teach the model what healthy lungs look like as well. So I've got some data that's also, non-COVID lungs that have been labeled as such. Okay, go ahead and hit add there. I'm going to look at my concept here. I can go and drill into this particular class. And what I see here is that I've got my data that I want to go ahead and add because there's no data present for this concept today. I'm going to go ahead and hit add. And now I can browse to my training data for normal lungs. So let me go ahead and select these guys. Going to go ahead and hit open. Now I've got all of the data that's coming from that particular folder is being uploaded into this particular concept. So I've got 20 positively labeled non-COVID lungs and 20 that are labeled as COVID. So the good thing is that this is really showcasing how little data is really required for being able to create a model. Let me go ahead and hit the create a model button. This takes us to the Clarifai gallery of all of our different models that we have available. I'm going to go ahead, and this is just going to be a basic classifier model, a custom classifier. I'm going to go ahead and give it a name. I'm going to go and give a display name for the model as well. This will be displayed on our Explorer view when we're back looking at our data. I'm going to select the concepts that will be part of this model that I'm going to be training on. And I'm going to go ahead and hit create model. I'm going to hit this button here. This is the last thing that I need to do to be able to have a model that's custom designed around my data and that's being trained to be able to identify those concepts. Now, what we see here is this takes literally seconds to go through the training data and start to create that model for us. Let me drop back to my Explorer view. What we see now is that COVID or not COVID is my active model, and it's been trained and it's ready to go. So the next step that I need to really be able to take is using that test data to start looking whether or not, how accurate my model is and what the results are. So I'm going to take some COVID data here. I'm going to go ahead and hit open. So this is going to add another data point to my Explorer view, and I can go and browse into this. and I can look at my custom model predictions. And what we wind up seeing is that with a high level of confidence, this test data for COVID lungs has predicted a result that these lungs do indeed have COVID, so 99.99%, similar to the other lungs and the features that the other lungs have present in them. Okay, so I can't really tell the difference on whether a lung has it or not, but the machine learning trained model can. And so this is a quick shortcut to being able to identify those kinds of things. So let's go back and let's start taking a look at a detection model. The next step around detection is really going to be deciding what kind of detection we want to take place here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create application here. I'm going to create a detection model specifically for my clothing company. So if I had a specific set of clothing that I wanted to look into and be able to understand, you know, this is a top, these are pants, what kinds of pants or shoes are within this, I'm going to start with being able to use my detection model. All right. So this is going to then break out specifically like where in the images each one of those pieces of clothing are. All right. I'm going to take advantage of just our general detection model. So that's going to tell me where in each image it is. And then we're going to actually take that and kind of walk through how to then apply apparel classification to it as well. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create here. So this is my detection model for clothing. I'm going to go ahead and start doing the same thing where I add data to this particular model. Go ahead and click my data sets, and I'm going to select women's clothing here and select, I've got a few images that I've curated for our demo here. Let me go ahead and go to our, we can see that they've been uploaded and that they're processing right now. And let's bounce over to our Explorer view. So we've got our images of clothing here. Let's click on one of them and see what this looks like. So we start to see that we're being able to detect within the frame specific concepts around, like, this is a person that's standing within my frame. We then run that through a cropper that's focusing just on that area of the image, and we start to classify using the general model precisely what kind of thing is actually being detected there. So we see denim pants that are casual, right? Isolated as the kind of image. We now have the ability to see and look at, you know, precisely where in the photograph the different concepts are being located at. And we get that visibility. Now, the next step that we want to do is really take that to being able to run this through an apparel model, so we can actually figure out, you know, are these denim jeans, you know, what do these sandals look like, for example, if we wanted to pull out that kind of level of information. The next step we'll have to take is creating a workflow. Now, the workflow itself is going to be very simple. We're going to have a 3-step workflow of using the visual detector and then running an image crop over it, and then putting that through our visual classifier specifically for apparel. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create workflow here, and these are all going to be out of the box detection workflows and classification workflows that are available from Clarifai. Okay, so let me go ahead and select our model type ID. The first thing that we're going to want to do is use our visual detector from Clarifai. And this is going to take us to our apparel detection. Now, this is a specifically trained detection model that's looking for those different pieces of clothing in our imagery. Now, the next step is, as we were saying, we want to focus on being able to crop down and focus on those particular pieces of apparel. I'm going to go ahead and do a cropper. And then the final step that I want to take is really going to be around that visual classifier. So I'm going to select my visual classifier as the last step. So I've got my apparel visual classifier that's been trained on a large curated set of data once again. And I'm going to go ahead and select the way that I want my workflow to actually let the data flow. So I have my apparel detection where it starts, cropper next, and finally ending off with my apparel classifier. I'm going to go ahead and hit create workflow here, and my apparel workflow has been created. I'm going to go over to my Explorer view, and I want to be able to look back at this picture again where we had our general detection coming through with, a high level of confidence that we have denim pants and casual, right? We want to look at this and see, what does this look like when it comes to applying apparel detection? So it takes a minute for it to run through for the first time. And what we see here is that we've got, we're not just identifying the individual person and then looking at what's on the person, we're identifying things like the pants, the top, and the shoes. And then we're taking that over to our classifier to be able to say, these are women's sandals. And so this level of classification can then come back and let us, if we wanted to even do a custom classifier, like if in your region you had a different name for these individual objects, you could once again use that same idea that I showed you with the COVID lungs classifier to create your own classifier for clothing, as well as, be able to define it for the words that you guys are most comfortable with. Okay. So with that in mind, let's start talking about custom facial recognition. Let me go ahead and add in a new application that's going to focus around facial data. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call this custom facial recognition. Lots of letters to type. I'm going to go ahead and hit face here for my base workflow. Go ahead and hit create. And so what we see here is I got my new custom facial recognition application. The next step that I want to take is once again going to be that first step that we always have to take, which is adding data. I'm going to go ahead and hit my data sets here. I'm going to look for facial recognition data. And so I've got a selection of different facial recognition data that's present here. I'm going to go ahead and hit open, and this is going to add in all of these faces into my application. Now, this could be if you have a list of the employees of your company, if you wanted to, be able to check in employees at your gate or be able to identify people who should or shouldn't be on premise, for example. All that this takes is, taking the shots of everybody. And so these are a bunch of Clarifai employees, all of the wonderful people who work on our back end. And, we've got Jeff there too. And I've uploaded all of those images here, and we're going to take this and be able to use this as the source for data, right? So, this is all of my employee data. I'm going to go ahead and hit add for my data mode here. And I'm going to take a particular URL, so I can add an image, not simply by finding a file and browsing for a file, but I can also use a URL of a file. So I'm going to go ahead and select that and add that to my data set. And so what we see here is that beautiful image of myself is up there along with all of our other folks from our employee file. And what I want to be able to do here is be able to do a custom facial recognition search. So this could be submitted once again through API, and I could basically do the return of being able to search against my image here. You go ahead and hit refresh. And we see that my facial recognition profile has come back with me being as the most likely candidate to match this photograph of me. So that's always a positive set of results to get. All right. So with that in mind, let's then take this same idea and let's start to utilize the workflows that we have for demographics. So if we want to, take this same imagery and be able to run this through a demographics model where we're focused on being able to find the multicultural appearance, gender appearance, as well as the age appearance of a particular individual, what that allows us to do is create a new application once again. So we once again walked through our handy dandy create an application wizard. I'm going to go ahead and hit demographics from the workflow. So this is going to, be the base workflow for demographics. And once again, what we see here is that we've got our demographics workflow created as our base workflow for our demographics application. Now, instead of feeding this data in through our Explorer view, what we actually want to do is be able to take this and utilize this through APIs. And so I've taken a script that's available on our docs.clarifai.com page. And I've created a Python script that's going to basically pull in this data for me. So I've got my API key that I'm going to utilize right here. Let me go ahead and hit copy key. I've got my terminal window where I've got my ability to use a Python script. And I'm going to put in the information for my key right here. So just paste in that demographics key. And I'm going to use this as the source image, this URL right here. And I'm going to go ahead and write that out. And I'm going to go ahead and run this with Python. And what this does is it's obviously reaching out and telling the API at Clarifai all of the information that's required to be able to return a particular result. And so this is the JSON response that we would expect to see from that could be consumed by, say, our mobile application, or if we had a particular application that we were using. What we see here is that we return back the different concepts around my particular cultural appearance, right? So I appear to be white. From the gender appearance, I appear to be male. And from the I appear to be masculine, I'm sorry. From the actual classification around my age, it's accurate, once again, to say that I'm somewhere between 30 and 39 years old.
Thank you for joining us today. Find out more at clarifai.com.